The school bell echoed through the halls of Lakeside High, signaling the start of another day. Miss Simmons, the history teacher known for her strict demeanor, stood at the front of her classroom. Her gaze swept over the students filing in, her expression as cold as ever. When the last student took their seat, the door opened and in walked a new face. Amara Brooks stepped into the room, her confident stride and vibrant presence immediately capturing everyone's attention. Whispers rippled through the room. Miss Simmons's lips thinned as she observed the new student. "You must be Amara," Miss Simmons said, her tone flat but laced with an edge of disdain. "Take a seat. Let's hope you can keep up." Amara's bright smile faltered slightly, but she complied, choosing an empty desk near the back of the room. The tension in the air was palpable as the teacher resumed her lesson, pointedly ignoring Amara's presence. Amara glanced around, noting the decor of the classroom, posters of historical figures, maps, and inspirational quotes. But the atmosphere didn't match the inspiring words on the walls. Instead, it felt cold, almost oppressive. As Miss Simmons began her lecture, Amara opened her notebook, determined to focus despite the hostile energy radiating from the teacher. The students around her seemed wary, their expressions guarded. A boy with glasses sneaked a glance at Amara before quickly looking away, while a girl 2 seats over gave her a small, encouraging smile. Amara appreciated the gesture, but couldn't shake the feeling of being under a microscope. When the lesson ended, Amara gathered her things and exited the classroom, her thoughts racing. She resolved to stay positive and prove herself, no matter how challenging Ms. Simmons made it. Throughout the day, Amara noticed Ms. Simmons's deliberate attempts to undermine her. When Amara raised her hand, the teacher called on someone else. When Amara answered, Ms. Simmons would nitpick her response. The subtle digs and dismissive behavior did not go unnoticed by the other students, though most were too intimidated to speak up. During the second period, Amara worked diligently on a group assignment, only to have Ms. Simmons hover nearby, making pointed comments about the need for accurate work. The teacher's tone carried an edge that made Amara's groupmates exchange uneasy glances. By lunchtime, the whispers about Ms. Simmons's behavior reached Amara. In the cafeteria, a girl named Tasha approached her. "Hey, you're the new girl, right? Just a heads up, Ms. Simmons has a reputation for being tough on certain students." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Certain students?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Tasha hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, you'll see what I mean. Just don't let her get to you." Amara thanked her but couldn't shake the sinking feeling in her chest. Still, she decided to focus on her studies, refusing to let the teacher's prejudice deter her. That evening, as she reviewed her notes at home, Amara made a list of goals. Participate actively, excel in her assignments, and stay resilient. She reminded herself of her father's words. "When people try to put you down, it's because they see your strength. Never forget that." Amara smiled, feeling a renewed sense of determination. She was ready to face whatever challenges Ms. Simmons threw her way. Ms. Simmons strode into the classroom with an air of authority, a stack of papers in her hand. The class fell silent, tension crackling in the air. "Surprise quiz," she announced, her voice sharp enough to slice through the murmur of protests that erupted. Her gaze lingered on Amara, her eyes narrowing slightly as though issuing a silent challenge. Amara met her gaze, refusing to flinch. As the quizzes were handed out, Amara took a deep breath. The questions were challenging, but she methodically worked through them, her pencil gliding confidently across the paper. She refused to let Ms. Simmons intimidate her. The room was filled with the sound of pencils scratching on paper, and Amara's determination grew with every question she answered. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the quiz, Ms. Simmons collected the papers with an enigmatic smile. The following day, the quizzes were returned. Ms. Simmons's face was unreadable as she handed Amara her paper. A perfect score. Amara's heart swelled with pride, but her triumph was short-lived. Ms. Simmons addressed the class, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It seems some of you have exceeded expectations," she said, her tone almost mocking. Her eyes flicked to Amara briefly before scanning the room. Perhaps it's time to introduce more rigorous standards. Amara felt the weight of her teacher's words. It wasn't just about the quiz. It was a declaration of war. Miss Simmons wasn't going to make this easy. Still, Amara's resolve only hardened. She wasn't about to back down. The library was quiet except for the occasional rustle of pages turning and the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. Amara was deeply engrossed in her study guide when Tasha slid into the seat across from her. Tasha had always been on the periphery of Amara's social circle, friendly but not overly close. Her sudden appearance was unexpected. "Amara," Tasha began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." Amara looked up, curious. Tasha glanced around nervously before continuing. "It's about Ms. Simmons. She's done this before." Amara frowned. "Done what?" Tasha's eyes darted around the room as if she feared being overheard. "She's targeted students. Last year, she made things so difficult for a girl named Rachel that she ended up transferring schools. Rachel was brilliant, just like you, but Ms. Simmons didn't like her." The revelation hit Amara like a punch to the gut. "Why would she do that?" Tasha shrugged, her expression grim. "I don't know. Maybe she feels threatened, or maybe she's just mean. But you need to be careful. She's not above making your life miserable." Amara leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had suspected that Ms. Simmons's animosity was personal, but hearing Tasha's account confirmed her worst fears. Still, she wasn't about to let a bitter teacher dictate her future. "Thanks for telling me," Amara said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But I'm not going anywhere. She can try all she wants, but I'm not going to let her win." Tasha's lips curved into a small smile. "Good. Just watch your back, okay?" Amara nodded, her determination solidifying further. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was standing up for every student Ms. Simmons had tried to tear down. The battle was just beginning, and Amara was ready to face whatever came her way. After another incident in class, Ms. Simmons scheduled a meeting with Amara's parents. She was confident this would address what she viewed as Amara's disruptive behavior. However, her confidence was shattered the moment Amara's father, Phil Brooks, entered the room. Known to the world as WWE star CM Punk, his commanding presence immediately shifted the power dynamic in the room. Ms. Simmons's usually confident demeanor faltered as Phil shook her hand. His calm but firm tone made it clear he wasn't there to play games. "I've heard quite a bit about how my daughter's been treated in your class," he began, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "I'll be keeping a close eye on this situation moving forward." The teacher, who had expected to intimidate Amara's parents, found herself on the defensive. She stammered through an explanation, citing Amara's attitude and lack of respect. But Phil wasn't having it. "Respect is a two-way street," he said evenly. "From what I've heard, you've done little to earn it." Amara, sitting quietly beside her father, couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. For once, she wasn't alone in facing Ms. Simmons's hostility. The meeting ended with the principal promising to review the matter. But Amara knew the tide was beginning to turn. Ms. Simmons, still reeling from the parent-teacher conference, decided to punish Amara in a subtler way. She assigned her to a group project with students, notorious for shirking responsibility. "Let's see how you handle a real challenge," Ms. Simmons said with a smirk. Amara's groupmates barely showed up for the first meeting, leaving her to carry the weight of the project. But instead of complaining, Amara took charge. She divided the work, set deadlines, and encouraged her group to contribute, even if it meant working late into the night. On presentation day, the project was a resounding success. Amara's leadership and meticulous preparation shone through. Even Miss Simmons had to grudgingly award the group an A, though she couldn't resist adding, "I'm being generous." Amara's classmates noticed her perseverance and began to admire her determination. She became an unspoken example of resilience, a quiet force that inspired others. Her actions spoke volumes. She didn't complain, even when burdened with an unfair workload. Instead, she worked tirelessly to ensure their success. The seeds of solidarity were being sown as her groupmates, once reluctant, began to see her in a new light. They started pitching in more, albeit hesitantly, and one even thanked her after the presentation for carrying the team. In the days following the project, whispers of Amara's resolve spread through the class. Students who had previously kept their distance started engaging with her more, offering small gestures of encouragement or outright compliments about her efforts. Even those who didn't speak openly about it exchanged knowing glances, silently acknowledging the injustice she faced and the grace with which she handled it. What started as quiet admiration began to bloom into a sense of collective support, and the atmosphere in the classroom started to shift subtly, one interaction at a time. In class, Ms. Simmons seemed more determined than ever to break Amara's spirit. One day, she called Amara to the board to solve a complex problem. When Amara hesitated for a moment, Ms. Simmons pounced. "It's a simple question, Amara. Surely you can handle it," she sneered. The class fell silent. Amara's heart raced as she stepped up to the board, every pair of eyes in the room fixed on her. She scanned the problem quickly, her mind working to piece together the solution. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if she got it wrong? But with a deep breath, she steadied herself and began writing. Her hand moved with precision as she carefully laid out the steps, ensuring each part of the solution was clear. When she finished, she turned to face the class, her voice steady as she explained her reasoning. A brief silence followed, and then a few students nodded in approval, impressed by her composure under pressure. But Miss Simmons was not about to let the moment pass without her interference. "You got the right answer," Miss Simmons began, her tone sharp and dismissive. "But your method is inefficient. A competent student would have used a simpler approach." She waved her hand as if brushing away Amara's effort entirely. Amara's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she refused to show it. "I thought this method was clearer for everyone to follow," she replied evenly, though her voice wavered slightly. She could feel the weight of the class's gaze, some students shifting uncomfortably while others watched the exchange with silent outrage. Ms. Simmons's lips curled into a thin smile. "Perhaps you should spend more time refining your techniques instead of overcomplicating things." Amara nodded respectfully, even as the sting of the teacher's words settled in her chest. She returned to her seat, keeping her head held high. As she sat down, she noticed a few quiet nods of respect from her classmates, subtle but encouraging. One student leaned over and whispered, "You did great," their tone filled with genuine admiration. Despite the humiliation, Amara felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. She knew Ms. Simmons was trying to undermine her, but the quiet support of her peers gave her the strength to keep going. The classroom might have been silent, but Amara was starting to sense a shift, an undercurrent of solidarity forming among the students. "You got the right answer, but your method is inefficient," she said, dismissing Amara with a wave of her hand. The humiliation stung, but Amara refused to let it show. She returned to her seat, her head held high, earning quiet nods of respect from her classmates. That evening, Amara vented her frustrations to her father. "It feels like no matter what I do, she finds a way to tear me down," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Phil listened intently, his expression growing darker with every word. "People like that are just bullies with power," he said finally. "They prey on those they think are weaker. But you're not weak, Amara. You're stronger than her." He shared stories from his wrestling career, recounting times when he'd faced similar challenges. "You don't fight fire with fire," he said. "You rise above it. Let your actions speak for themselves." Amara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't going to let Ms. Simmons win. The next day, Amara delivered a well-prepared presentation on a historical topic. Her classmates were captivated by her research and delivery, but Ms. Simmons was less impressed. "While your effort is commendable," she began, her tone dripping with condescension, "your analysis misses the broader context." Amara felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, a classmate raised their hand. "Actually, I thought Amara's points were really insightful," they said, prompting murmurs of agreement. For the first time, the class began to openly challenge Ms. Simmons's bias. Whispers of discontent grew louder, and Amara realized she wasn't alone anymore. After class, Tasha and a few other students approached Amara. "You were amazing today," Tasha said. "It's about time someone stood up to her." Another classmate chimed in. "We're with you. Let's stand up to her together." Amara's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time, she felt the power of solidarity. Together, they began brainstorming ways to address the teacher's behavior.